Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multidimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 165 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and on this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastering. I've been running RPGs for over 25 years now, actually 26 years. I added it up the other day. I did the math. It's been 26 years I've been running RPGs, and I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. I've got a great show for you today. Today I am returning to the Dungeon Master's Guide in a continuation of episode 164, which was all about campaign events. So today I am going to... Hang on. Today is about campaign events. My bad. Episode 164 was all about creating campaigns. Today I am continuing that discussion talking about campaign events. So this is a bonus episode of the show thanks to the patrons of Star Walker Studios. So the patrons help us hit a milestone goal on Star Walker Studios Patreon, which means that every month I do an extra bonus episode that's above and beyond the regular weekly episodes of the show. So thank you, patrons, so much for your support. And on behalf of the listeners, thank you for allowing us to have this bonus episode today. I also wanted to let you know that for a limited time only, Season 7 and select episodes of Season 6 of Game Master's Journey are back in the free public feed. So the feed that you're likely subscribed to in your podcast app of choice contains only the most recent episodes of the show. In order to get access to all of the archived episodes all the way back to episode 1, which was like 2.5 years ago now, you have to be a patron, and tier 1 patrons get access to all of the archived episodes. And season 6 and 7 were archived, but for a limited time, they're back in the public feed and available to everyone for free. And these episodes include some classic episodes and some fan favorite episodes of Game Master's Journey. So if you're a new listener to the show and you haven't heard these episodes before, definitely check out your app and scroll back to the beginning of the episodes, and you can download those. And again, the episodes before that are archived. They're available to patrons of the show. So when you become a patron, you get access to a new private RSS feed that you can subscribe to in your app. And then you will be able to get all those episodes automatically, as well as the other patron bonus content. So every once in a while, I get a question from someone, usually newer listeners of the show, wondering, I don't see any episodes before episode 101. Where are they? How can I get access to them? So that's how you can get access to them, by becoming a patron of Star Walker Studios. So you can find a link to my Patreon page over in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. Also, I want to let you know that Star Walker Studios now has official Game Master's Journey t-shirts. And you can find a link to our store over on Spreadshirt at the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. And we have quite a few designs that my wife Nikki made for us. And not only can you get those designs on t-shirts, but you can get them on sweatshirts and aprons and coffee mugs and all kinds of stuff. So there are designs for Game Master's Journey featuring the logo, the album art, some previous album art. Those who've been with the show since the beginning know that the album art has changed a few times since the beginning. There are also designs just for Star Walker Studios. There are designs for the Trickster's Labyrinth, which is my D&D adventure that I've recently published. And those designs feature the logo and also some of them the cover art of the Trickster's Labyrinth, which is really, truly excellent. And Nikki did that cover art for me too. So definitely check out our store on Spreadshirt, and a great way to show your support of Game Master's Journey and of gaming in general and podcasting in general is to buy one of our shirts and wear it around. And when people ask you what it is, tell them about the show. It's kind of amazing. Here it is, 2017, 21st century, technology has advanced so much. And yet, at least when it comes to podcasting, the number one form of advertising, the number one way that new listeners find the show is through word of mouth. It's not through any advertisements I might pay for on other podcasts. It's not through iTunes reviews. It's not through any other way. It's through word of mouth. You telling your friends about, hey, this great D&D podcast or this great RPG podcast I listen to. It's still the number one way that we get new listeners. So it's a great way to support the show. And what more fun way to do it than by wearing an awesome t-shirt. I'm planning to get some of these shirts myself to wear when I live stream and stuff. And I've been needing some new t-shirts anyway. So I want to get some Game Master's Journey t-shirts and Trickster's Labyrinth and Star Walker Studios and all that good stuff. So yeah, check out the store. And after we've had it up for a while and it's hopefully brought in a little bit of revenue, we do have ideas for additional designs to do in the future. But Nikki put a lot of time and work into what's up there now. So we're going to get a little return on that investment before we double down and do even more designs. But I will let you know on the show when there are more designs so that you can go check those out. Also, I kind of already mentioned it, but I also want to let you know that I have recently published a adventure for D&D called The Trickster's Labyrinth. It's for third level characters, and it's an easy adventure to use no matter, if you're doing a one shot or you're in the middle of a campaign, no matter what setting you're using. It's really an easy adventure to just plop in anywhere. And that's for sale over at starwalkerstudios.com as well, and is another great way that you can support what I'm doing here. Now, finally, before I go into our main topic and start talking about campaign events, I want to give a thank you and a shout out to some new patrons of the show. So huge thank you and shout out to new patrons, Sky, Iwan, I hope I said that right, and Cameron. So thank you so much, patrons. Thank you so much, all the patrons. Really appreciate it. Really happy to see some new patrons coming in. And again, the number one way, other than telling your friends about the show, to support the show is by becoming a patron. And not only can you get access to all of the archived older episodes of Game Master's Journey, but there's a lot of other cool perks that patrons, if I could spit it out, enjoy on the show or enjoy in the Patreon. So check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/Star Walker Studios. So without further ado, let's move on to our main topic. All right, so today we are getting back into the DMG and we are going to talk about campaign events. So sorry, I totally screwed this up at the top of the show trying to bring you up to speed or remind you on what we talked about last time. So earlier this week in episode 164, we were talking about the section in chapter 1 of the DMG on creating campaigns. And a part of this section is a whole subsection on campaign events. So we put this off because I didn't want episode 164 to be insanely long. So we put this off for the bonus episode. So this is a direct continuation of our discussion from episode 164. So if this is the first time you're listening to this show, you might want to go catch up on episode 164 first, but you don't have to. It's not required to make sense of this episode, what we're talking about today. Oh, and real quickly, before I get into this, for any new listeners, and just to remind all of you, I want to let you know that anytime I do these episodes where I'm discussing the DMG, I will, in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com, I will have links to all the previous episodes in this series. So I went through the player's handbook and talked about the general rules of the game and a lot of the material in the PHB that we as game masters want to be familiar with. And now I'm doing the same with the Dungeon Master's Guide, going through chapter by chapter, page by page, and just discussing it. So, I don't do these every single episode. So if you go to the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com for this episode 165, you can find links to all the previous episodes in the series if you want to go back to the beginning or catch one you've missed or anything like that. So I often forget to mention that during the show, but anytime I'm I'm discussing a topic and you want more information or you want to find an episode that's relevant to that topic, check out the show notes. I usually, if not always, will have links to other related episodes and other resources out there relevant to whatever topic we're discussing that day. So we're still in chapter 1 of the DMG, and chapter 1's all about world building. So these episodes also tend to be world building episodes, and I tend to use my home brew setting that I'm creating for D&D that I call Primordia as an example when we're talking about these world building topics. So last time we talked about creating campaigns and some ideas and strategies for, how to create a campaign. And today we're talking about campaign events. So what do we mean by campaign events? Well, significant events in the history of a fantasy world tend toward immense upheavals, wars that pit the forces of good against evil in an epic confrontation, natural disasters that lay waste to entire civilizations, invasions of vast armies or extraplanar hordes, assassinations of world leaders. So these world-shaking events title the chapters of history. In a D&D game, such events provide the sparks that can ignite and sustain a campaign. The most common pitfall of serial stories without a set beginning, middle, and end is inertia, or I would say lack of inertia. Like many television shows and comic book series, a D&D campaign runs the risk of retreading the same ground long after the enjoyment's gone. Just as actors or writers drift away from those other mediums, so can players, the actors and writers of a D&D game. And I would also add, so can the DM. DMs can get bored with a campaign too. Games stagnate when the story meanders too long without a change in tone, when the same villains and similar adventures grow tiresome and predictable, and when the world doesn't change around the characters, and I think most importantly, in response to their actions or their inactions. World-shaking events force conflict. They set new events and power groups in motion. Their outcomes change the world by altering the tone of the setting in a meaningful way. They chronicle the story of your world in big, bold print. Change, especially change that occurs as a result of the character's actions, or lack of action, keeps the story moving. If change is imperceptible, the actions of the characters lack significance. When the world becomes reliable, it's time to shake things up. So that's kind of an introduction of what we're talking about today. So by campaign events, we're talking about some major event that happens in your setting that's going to take the story in a new direction. Now, of course, in the very beginning of the campaign, that's going to probably be something that you come up with that's going to launch the story. And one point I want to add to this, they talk about, and we're going to talk about more here in a minute, about using the beginning, the middle, and the end of your campaign as times to use these big events. And a good rule of thumb to keep in mind when you're thinking about the beginning of your campaign is that there should be one of these events or some kind of event that is either happening right now when we start the campaign or is about to happen, is going to happen, like ideally in the first session. A good story begins at a point of change, and you can go through the mental exercise of thinking of some of your favorite stories, whether that's from a novel or a movie or a TV show or a comic book. Think of a favorite story or many favorite stories. Think of the beginning of that story, and you will see that the story begins with some change happening, some major change in the main character's life. The very beginning scenes of the story are about something big changing in that character's life. So for an example, let's take Star Wars: A New Hope. We start out the beginning of the story and Luke is this farm boy on Tatooine, but through the course of the story, he discovers that he can use the Force. He learns that his father was a Jedi Knight, and he leaves Tatooine to see the galaxy and fight the Empire. So we see here that this story has begun with a major change. And actually, that's changes from the point of view of Luke, who is the main character or one of the main characters of the stories. But there's other changes happening too. We see in the opening scenes in the very beginning of Star Wars: A New Hope, we see the dissolving of the Senate. So the last kind of lip service to the old Republic is gone, and the Galactic Empire is now in complete control. The Senate's been dissolved. We see the creation of the Death Star, and this is something new that the rebels have to deal with. So we can really see how Star Wars: A New Hope, in the very beginning, there are a lot of changes happening, and that's why it's a good story, and that's why that's a good point to begin the story. And you can do this exercise with any story you think of, and any good story is going to begin with a time of change, and those changes will directly impact the main character or the main characters. Putting events in motion. World-shaking events can happen at any time in a campaign or story arc, but the biggest incidents naturally fall at the beginning, middle, and end of a story. That placement reflects the structure of dramatic stories. At the beginning, and basically what they're talking about here in this next paragraph is the 3-act structure. And I find it interesting that they don't actually mention the 3-act structure, because that's what they're talking about here. So for more in-depth information on this, go look for information on the 3-act structure. Just do a Google search for 3-act structure. There are loads of podcast episodes and articles and blog posts and everything about how to use the 3-act structure, whether you're a writer or a screenwriter or a playwright or a dungeon master. Not all stories, but a lot of stories in our tradition use the 3-act structure. And this is very much glossing over it. So I highly recommend that you do some digging into the 3-act structure, and maybe that probably actually would be a good topic for an episode of the show, using the 3-act structure as a game master, and we could unpack the 3-act structure and the principles of that. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. Shoot me a tweet at LexStarWalker, or shoot me an email, gamemastersjourney@gmail.com, and let me know if you want to hear about the 3-act structure. If I hear from some people that want to hear about it, I'll do an episode on it. At the beginning of a story, Act 1, something happens to shake the protagonist's world and spur them into action. The characters take action to resolve their problems, but other forces oppose them. Also, the original 3 Star Wars movies are a fantastic example of the 3-act structure in motion. Movie 1, Act 1, Movie 2, Empire Strike Back, Act 2, Movie 3, The Return of the Jedi, Act 3. As they reach a significant milestone toward their goal, a major conflict disrupts the characters' plans, shaking their world again. Failure seems imminent. Act 2. At the end of the story, Act 3, they succeed or fail, and the world is shaken again by the way the characters changed it for good or ill. At the beginning of a D&D campaign, world-shaking events create instant adventure hooks and affect the characters' lives directly, or they should. In the middle, they make great turning points as the characters' fortunes reverse, rising after a defeat or falling after a victory. Near the end of a campaign, such events serve as excellent climactic episodes with far-reaching effects. They might even occur after the story has ended as a result of the character's actions. When not to shake it up. In constructing a narrative, beware of, quote, false action or action for its own sake. False action doesn't move a story forward, engage characters, or cause them to change. Many action movies suffer from false action, in which car chases, gunfights, and explosions abound, but do little more than inconvenience the characters and eventually bore the audience with their repetition and dearth of meaningful stakes. Some D&D campaigns fall into the same trap, stringing world-spanning disasters together one after another with little impact on the characters or the world. Thus, it's probably not in the DM's best interest to reorder the world every single time there's a lull in the action, lest world-shaking events become ordinary. So, speaking of false action, I think a perfect example of false action in a D&D game or in any RPG game are what I call chump encounters, which is a combat encounter, or it could be a social or exploration encounter, that you throw at the player characters that involve rolling dice and resolving like you would a normal combat encounter or whatever, but that have no challenge and or no consequences of failure, and kind of just feel like a complete waste of time, because they are a complete waste of time. So throwing an encounter at your player characters that is not a threat, that there is no consequence of failure or there's no likelihood of failure, is false action. There's no point to it. So, one reason that people will do this, I think sometimes that GMs will do this, is the idea of attrition, of, oh, well, this particular encounter isn't a challenge and isn't particularly interesting, and there's no real consequence of failure, there's no real likelihood of failure. But if I throw 20 of them at them, it's going to whittle down their resources and slowly over time is going to wear them down to a point where it's going to start to matter and it's going to make a difference. The adventure I'm running on YouTube right now, The Hidden Shrine of Tamawakan, seems to use this kind of philosophy of, let's just slowly wear them down over time. Now, that can be a great tactic in real life. That can even be an interesting thing to read about in a story. But as a method to use in an RPG, it's terrible. It's boring, and it leads to that thing that we call a slog. And it's not fun. And honestly, there are much better ways that you can challenge your player characters, that you can put them in danger, than slowly over multiple chump encounters whittling down their hit points and their class resources and their spell slots and things like that. There are much more fun, much more dramatic, much more interesting ways to threaten the player characters than that one. It's a very kind of old school way of approaching things. Kind of comes, I think, from the wargaming roots of D&D, such as, something like that would be a lot more fun in wargaming, like this slow attrition of resources. But in a tabletop RPG, it should be anathema in your games. All right, let's get back to our discussion of when not to shake it up. As a general rule, a campaign can sustain up to 3 large-scale world-shaking events. Again, they're repeating themselves, one near the beginning, one near the middle, and one near the end. Use as many small-scale events that disturb the bounded microcosms of towns, villages, tribes, fiefs, duchies, provinces, and so forth as you like. So they're saying here you can have smaller events that affect a local area, but as far as some big event that's going to affect an entire region or the world or something like that, you probably want to limit it to 3 or less. And if you're talking world-shaking stuff, unless your campaign is really long and spans a lot of time in world and also a lot of time in the real world, I think 3 would be too many world-shaking events. It starts to become kind of status quo. How many times can you save the world before it is no longer exciting? Every significant event shakes someone's world, even if it's a small one. After all, no matter how small that world might be. Let unexpected and terrible events regularly afflict the world's smaller territories, but unless your story demands it, save the large-scale mapping events for the biggest, most important moments of your campaign. All right, so we've talked a little bit about, when and how often to use these events. Now we're going to go into talking more about how to come up with these events and different types of events that you could use. World-shaking events. You can use this section for ideas and inspiration to expand on world-shaking events already occurring or soon to occur within your world. Or you can roll on the tables below to randomly generate an event to inspire your imagination. The attempt to justify a random result can reveal unforeseen possibilities. So my advice to you would be to go through here and cherry pick. You want to be able to shape things that make sense and have kind of a theme or multiple themes and a reason things happen and these events don't just come out of nowhere. They're an outgrowth of things that are happening in your world. So, the ideal is always to use these for inspiration and go through here and select what makes sense and work from there. But if you're really stumped and you need inspiration, you can, as it suggests, just roll and see where what you roll takes you and what kind of ideas it generates. All right, so we start out with a world-shaking events table. So this gives you general types of events, and then you go to that type of event and it has more details about that type of event, as well as another table to help you determine what exactly that event is. So on the World Shaking Events table, we have Rise of a Leader or an Era, Fall of a Leader or an Era, Cataclysmic Disaster, Assault or Invasion, Rebellion, Revolution or Overthrow, Extinction or Depletion, New Organization, Discovery, Expansion or Invention, Prediction, Omen or Prophecy, and Myth and Legend. So again, you can go through here and find the one that really fits what you want to do. Or if you've got new ideas or you're just looking for ideas, you can just explore these tables or even roll dice randomly, whatever works for you. So we'll go through these a bit. The first one is Rise or Fall of a Leader or an Era. Eras are often defined by prominent leaders, innovators, and tyrants of the day. These people changed the world and etched their signatures indelibly on the pages of history. When they rise to power, they shape the time and place where they live in monumental ways. When they fall from power or pass away, the ghost of their presence lingers. Determine the kind of leader that influences the new or passing era. You can choose the leader. Okay, so again, they have a table. So we have political, religious, military, crime/underworld, art/culture, or philosophy/learning/magic. So these are the different types of leaders that could be involved with this event. Political leaders are monarchs, nobles, and chiefs. Religious leaders include deities' avatars, high priests, and messiahs, as well as those in charge of monasteries and leaders of influential religious sects. Major military leaders control the armed forces of countries. They include military dictators, warlords, and the heads of a ruler's war council. Minor military leaders include the heads of local militias, gangs, and other martial organizations. At the broadest scale, a criminal or underworld leader wields power through a network of spies, bribes, and black market trade. On the smallest scale, these are local gang bosses, pirate captains, and brigands. A leader in art or culture is a virtuoso whose work reflects the spirit of the age and changes the way people think. A prominent playwright, bard, or court fool in whose words, art, or performance the people perceive universal truth. On a smaller scale, this might be an influential local poet, minstrel, satirist, or sculptor. A major leader in philosophy, learning, or magic is a genius philosopher, a counselor to emperors, an enlightened thinker, the head of the highest institution of learning in the world, or an archmage. A minor leader might be a local sage, seer, hedge wizard, wise elder, or teacher. So right there, you've got a buttload of different types of leaders, both major and minor, that you could use for this event. And, likely those ideas will just spur on even more ideas that you might come up with yourself. So now we talk about the rise of that leader, the beginning of an era. In dramatic stories, a new leader's rise often comes at the end of a period of struggle or turmoil. Sometimes it's a war or uprising. Other times it's an election, the death of a tyrant, a prophecy fulfilled, or the appointment of a hero. Conversely, the new leader might be a tyrant, a fiend, or black-hearted villain, and the era that just ended could have been one of peace, tranquility, and justice. So you could go either way. Either the new leader is a good thing, or it's a bad thing. A new leader shakes the foundations of your campaign world and begins a new era in the selected region. How does this person or this era begin to affect the world? Here are several things to consider when determining the leader's impact in the world. Name one thing that has been consistently true about the world, which is now no longer true due to this leader's rise or influence. This is the biggest change that occurs when the new leader takes power and becomes the prevailing trait that defines the era, the characteristic for which it is remembered. So it's a new era, new age. Name the person or people whose death, defeat, or loss opened the door for this leader to take power. This might be a military defeat, the overthrow of old ideas, a cultural rebirth, or something else. Who died, lost, or was defeated? What weren't they willing to compromise? Was the new leader complicit in the death, defeat, or loss, or was the opportunity serendipitous? Despite the leader's virtues, one flaw in particular outrages a certain segment of the populace. What is that flaw? What person or group of persons will do their utmost to foil this leader because of it? Conversely, what is this leader's greatest virtue, and who rises to the leader's defense because of it? Who believes in this leader now, but still retains doubts? This is someone close to the leader who has the leader's trust and knows his or her secret fears, doubts, or vices. So, obviously there's two ways you could use a leader as an event. You could use the rise of a leader, which we just discussed, or you could use the fall of a leader and the end of an era, or these both could happen at once, right? When one leader falls, a new leader rises. All that begins must end. With the fall of kings and queens, the maps of the world are redrawn. Laws change, new customs become all the rage, and old ones fall out of favor. The attitude of the citizens toward their fallen leader shifts subtly at first and then changes dramatically as they look back or reminisce about the time before. The fallen leader might have been a benevolent ruler, an influential citizen, or even an adversary to the characters. How does the death of this person affect those formerly under his or her influence? Here are several things to consider when determining the effects of a leader's passing. Name one positive change that the leader brought to his or her domain or sphere of influence. Does that change persist after the leader's death? State the general mood or attitude of the people under this person's power. What important fact didn't they realize about this person or his or her reign, which will later come to light? Name one person or group that tries to fill the leader's shoes in the resulting power vacuum. Name one person or group that plotted against this leader. Name 3 things for which this leader will be remembered. So there you go. I mean, those are a lot of prompts there. And I think if you want to use the rise or the fall of a leader as a major event in your campaign, that going through those questions and thinking about what the answers to them might be is going to go a long way to helping you flesh out exactly what the rise or fall of this leader is going to mean to the region, what impacts it may have, and of course, most importantly, what could this mean for the characters? How could this change their lives? All right, so fall or rise of a leader is just one of the events we're going to talk about. The next one is a cataclysmic disaster. Now, this is so much of a trope in fantasy as to be a cliche, and almost seems like you can't have a fantasy world without a cataclysmic disaster of some kind. Either it happened in the distant past, or it happened in the recent past, or it's happening now, or it's about to happen. Just about any fantasy setting I can think of, or any fantasy story I can think of, has the cataclysmic disaster rearing its head somewhere. And that's fine. One thing nice about running RPGs as opposed to writing stories, whether that's novels or films or graphic novels or TV shows or whatever, is we as dungeon masters don't have to worry so much about cliche. Oftentimes in an RPG, a cliche can actually be a good thing. When you're writing in other mediums, you want to avoid them as much as possible. But in a D&D game, I mean, if you took all the cliches out of D&D, there'd be nothing left. So in a D&D campaign or in any RPG campaign, the cliches can often serve as touchstones for the players to help ground them in the setting, in the story, and help them put this experience in as part of the tradition that it's in. So if you're playing a fantasy game, it helps them identify this as, yes, I'm having a fantasy experience. Or if you're playing a sci-fi game, it helps them feel like, yes, I'm having a sci-fi experience. Or if you're playing Star Wars, it helps them feel like, yes, this is totally a Star Wars game that we're playing because this really cliched Star Wars thing just happened. Turns out my father wasn't who I thought he was. Dun, dun, dun. But now I feel like I'm really playing the Star Wars game, right? So yeah, cliches in this context are not necessarily bad, and oftentimes can be good. So, don't mark the cataclysmic disaster off of your list just because it's a cliche. Feel free to use it. And I think the key, because I have cataclysmic disasters in my setting of Primordia, and in fact, kind of the event that's beginning my campaign that I'm going to be running soon is a reaction to recent cataclysms that have happened, and one that is still ongoing, namely the time of the rifts and the breaking of the world, both of which actually are still ongoing to greater or lesser degree. So, this is a case where the cataclysm happened a few years ago, but it's still kind of happening, and there's still, I almost think of it like an earthquake. Like there's the initial earthquake and then there's aftershocks, right? So there are still aftershocks of the cataclysm happening today. And the campaign, kind of the quote event that's kicking off this campaign, or one of them, is how do we deal with that? How do we live in this new world that's been created from the ashes of the old world that was just recently destroyed? So I'm using the cliche totally in Primordia, and, that's okay. One way to approach it, and I think a good way to approach it is, you want to be mindful, you want to know that you're using a cliche. And then when you are using a cliche, just think of a way to put your own spin on it, to do something different with it. Maybe something we've never seen before, or at least not the thing we've seen so many times before, right? Do something to make your cliche not completely a cliche all the way down the line, right? Do some interesting things with it, put some different spins on it, or something like that. And just doing that can make it unique enough that the fact that it is a cliche will be cool and won't be lame. All right, so cataclysmic disaster, earthquake, famine, fire, plague, flood. Disasters on a grand scale can eradicate whole civilizations without warning. Natural or magical catastrophes redraw maps, destroy economies, and alter worlds. Sometimes the survivors rebuild from the ruins. The Great Chicago Fire, for instance, wow, this just kicked me out of the book. Why are we talking about the Chicago Fire? I think we all know what natural disasters are. Do we really need a modern era reference to that? They could have at least made a reference to something that happened in the Forgotten Realms. Would have been better than the Chicago Fire. But anyway, the Great Chicago Fire, for instance, provided an opportunity to rebuild the city according to a modern plan. Most of the time, the disaster leaves only ruins, buried under ash like Pompeii, or sunk beneath the waves like Atlantis. You can choose the cataclysm, or okay, they're going to tell us this every table. Let us know. Give us permission to either choose something or roll something on the table. Seems a little overkill, but there are people out there that if you didn't tell them they could pick something, would think that they had to roll on the table and live with whatever they rolled. So for those people, we got to keep reminding them, hey, you're the GM. You are the ultimate authority in your world, in your campaign, in your game. So feel free to pick something from this table or use something inspired by something from this table. You don't have to roll. And if you do roll, you don't have to use what you rolled. So that's a caveat. We won't mention that every time in every example like Wizards does. Wizards is making a reference book, so they have to mention it every time because you might not read all of these. You might just skip to the one you want to read, right? So they got to mention it every time. But hopefully you're not skipping around the podcast. So we'll just tell you once that, rolling is optional and you don't have to use what you roll. But again, we have a table of cataclysmic disasters. Those include earthquake, famine or drought, fire, flood, plague or disease, rain of fire, or a meteoric impact, a storm, a hurricane, a tornado or a tsunami, volcanic eruption, magic gone awry or a planar warp, divine judgment. Just for fun here, I want to see how many of these are pulled together in my recent cataclysm in Primordia that was begun by the event that is called the Time of the Rifts and is also called the Breaking of the World. Let's see. Earthquake. Yes. Check. Famine, drought. Most likely as a direct result of it. Check. Fire. Yes. Check. Flood. Yes. Check. Plague or disease. I haven't thought about that, but anytime something major like this happens, plague and disease are definitely a possibility. So I think that's a very real possible check. Rain of fire, meteoric impact. Yeah, check. Storm, hurricane, tornado, tsunami. Yes, check. All of the above. Volcanic eruption. Yes, very much so. Check. Magic on awry or a planar warp. Yes, both. Check. And divine judgment. Actually, that's the one thing in this list that was not part of my cataclysm. It wasn't so much a divine judgment. This was actually, here's a spoiler. Here's a secret in the world that no one knows, but I don't mind letting this little tidbit by the gates of my lips. The cataclysm was actually not caused by the gods. It was caused by people. The gods did try to mitigate it somewhat, but it was not divine judgment. It was human error, I guess you could say. It's definitely caused by people, not by the gods. All right. So those are all the different types of cataclysms we're going to talk about. So some of the disasters on the table might not make immediate sense in the context of your campaign world, or like me, they might all make sense. How fun is that? A flood in the desert, a volcanic eruption on grassy plains. And again, they again say they're going to say this over and over again. If you're like using random rolls to generate ideas, and if you come up with something that immediately doesn't make sense, like it's a desert and you roll a flood, you can of course just reject that out of hand and generate something else. But a fun exercise can be to try to use that thing and see what kind of ideas you come up with when you ask the question, for instance, how can there be a flood in the desert. I've decided this is a desert. I've determined a flood happens. How am I going to reconcile those seemingly incompatible things? How am I going to make that work? And you might, by answering those questions, come up with some really cool ideas that you decide you want to use. So that can be a great exercise. Anytime you're using a table or a list or anything and you're kind of generating ideas, you know, when you come up with something that just on the face of it doesn't make any sense and you're going to throw it out, you know, consider maybe exploring that and seeing if you could make sense of it. And once you've done so, is that something you're interested in and excited about and maybe want to use? With two exceptions, the disasters on the table resemble those that affect our own world. Think of planar warps and magic gone awry like nuclear incidents. They're big events that unnaturally alter the land and its people. For example, in the Eberron setting, a magical catastrophe lays waste to an entire country, transforming it into a hostile wasteland and ending the last war. Divine judgment is something else entirely. This disaster takes whatever form you want, but it's always a big, bold, unsettled sign of a deity's displeasure. You might decide to wipe a town, region, or nation off the map of your world. A disaster ravages the land and effectively eliminates a place the characters once knew. And this would be a great way to do this if this isn't going to be an event at the beginning of the campaign, if this is something that happens at the middle or the end. A great way to really make it impact the players is to have it happen or have it affect or destroy an area that they've been to, that they know, and that they're fond of, and full of NPCs that they're fond of. And that'll really give it a much bigger impact. All right, let's see. Where was I? Leave one or two survivors to tell the characters what happened and ensure that the characters feel the depth of the catastrophe. What are the ongoing effects of this cataclysm? The following points can help you define the nature and consequences of the disaster. Decide what caused this cataclysm and where it originated. An omen presaged this event, or a series of signs and omens. Describe the omen in detail. Describe or name the creature that warned the populace about the oncoming disaster. Who listened? Or maybe more to the point, who didn't listen? Who were the lucky or unlucky ones who survived? Describe what the area looks like after the disaster in contrast to how it looked before. So there are some ways that you can kind of flesh out this disaster and think about some of the consequences that it's going to have in your setting. So our next type of event is an assault or invasion. One of the most common world-shaking events, an invasion, occurs when one group forcibly takes over another, usually by military strength, but also by infiltration and occupation. An assault differs from an invasion in that the attacking force isn't necessarily interested in occupation or taking power. On the other hand, an assault might be the first step of an invasion. Regardless of the scale, a world-shaking assault or invasion stands out because its repercussions change the character's world and its effects echo long after the initial attack or takeover. Imagine that part of your campaign world, or sorry, I didn't inflect that quite right. Let's try that again. Imagine that part of your campaign world is attacked or invaded. Depending on the current state of your campaign, the area might be as small as a section of a city or as large as a continent, world, or plane of existence. Define the aggressor and whether it represents a known enemy or a previously unknown adversary. Select a threat that already poses a danger to the area you've chosen, or use the invading forces table to determine the aggressor. So, invading forces we have here are a criminal enterprise, monsters or a unique monster, a planar threat, a past adversary reawakened, reborn, or resurgent, a splinter faction, a savage tribe, a secret society, or a traitorous ally. Now, consider these other aspects of the conflict. Name one element of the invasion or assault that the defenders didn't expect or couldn't repel. Something happened to the first defenders who stood against the invasion or assault. Something no one wants to talk about. What was it? The attackers or invaders had a motive for their action that wasn't obvious or understood at first. What was it? Who turned traitor, and at what point did they turn? Why did they do it? Did an attacker try to stop the incursion, or did a prominent defender throw in with the invaders? All right, so there we go. Assault or invasion is another way you could go, and you're probably seeing already or going to see how you could also combine these different things together and use different events that feed off one another. So maybe you do the cataclysm, but then because of the cataclysm and because of the chaos that ensues, there could be numerous assaults and invasions that happen as a part of that. So, you can totally use multiple events together and think about how one event could flow into another event, and things just keep getting worse.
This is Shane from the Total Party Thrill podcast, and you're listening to Lex Starwalker on Game Master's Journey.
I want to take a minute to give a quick shout out to the patrons of Starwalker Studios. The support of the patrons makes this show possible. If you enjoy Game Master's Journey and you'd like to give a little back, becoming a patron is a great way to do so. It's because of the patrons that all the listeners of Game Master's Journey enjoy a bonus episode like this one every month, as well as the Game Master's Journey live stream. I'd also like to give a huge shout out and thank you to my Tier 5 patron, Steve. Let's hear it for Steve. Yeah.
You the man.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you to all the patrons. You can find out more about becoming a patron by clicking on the Patreon button at the top of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. All right, so we are going to return to our discussion of campaign-changing events. So next, we have rebellion, revolution, or overthrow. Dissatisfied with the current order, a person or group of people overturns the dominant regime and takes over or fails to take over. Regardless of the result, a revolution, even an attempted one, can shape the destiny of nations. The scale of a revolution need not involve the common masses against the nobility. A revolution can be as small as a merchant's guild revolting against its leadership, or a temple overthrowing its priesthood in favor of a new creed. The spirits of the forest might attempt to overthrow the forces of civilization in a nearby city that cut down trees for timber. Alternatively, the scale can be as dramatic as humanity rising to overthrow the gods. Imagine that part of your campaign world erupts in revolution. Pick a power group in your current campaigns and name or invent a group that opposes it, fomenting revolution. Then let the following points help you flesh out the conflict. Name 3 things the rebels want or hope to achieve. The rebels achieve a victory against those they wish to overthrow, even if it's a Pyrrhic victory. I don't know that word. Which of their 3 goals do they achieve? How long is this achievement likely to last? State the costs exacted upon the old order after its fall from power. Does anyone from the former power group remain in power during the next regime? If the old order remains in power, describe one way that its leaders punish the revolutionaries. One of the rebellion's prominent leaders, in some respects the face of the revolution, was driven by a personal reason for his or her part in events. Describe this person and state the true reason he or she led the rebellion. What problem existed before the revolution that persists in spite of it? Another campaign event we could use is extinction or depletion. Something that once existed in the campaign world is gone. The lost resource might be a precious metal, a species of plant or animal that held an important place in the local ecology, or an entire race or culture of people. Its absence causes a chain reaction that affects every creature that uses or relies on it. You can eliminate a people, place, or thing that previously existed in a certain location or area in your campaign world. On a small scale, the last of a family dynasty passes away, or a once thriving mining town in a region dries up and becomes a ghost town. On a grand scale, magic dies. The last dragon is slain, or the final Fey noble departs the world. What is gone from the world, or the region of the world you've chosen that once existed there? If the answer isn't immediately evident, consult the extinction or depletion table for ideas. So here are some possible things that could have gone extinct or been depleted. A kind of animal, an insect, bird, fish, or livestock. Habitable land. Magic or magic users. Could be all magic or specific kinds or schools of magic. A mineral resource like gems, metals, or ores. A type of monster, maybe unicorns, manticores, or dragons. A people, a family line, a clan, a culture, a race. A kind of plant. It could be a crop, a tree, an herb, or a forest. A waterway, a river, a lake, or an ocean. So once you've figured out what's gone extinct or what's been depleted, you can think about these questions. Name a territory, race, or type of creature that relied on the thing that was lost. How do they compensate? How do they attempt to substitute for what was lost? Who or what is to blame for the loss? What's behind it? Describe an immediate consequence of the loss. Forecast one way that the loss impacts or changes the world in the long term. Who or what suffers the most as a result of the loss? Who or what benefits the most from it? And yeah, I think those questions are a great way to get you started and get you on the path to figuring out, how this extinction or depletion is going to affect your setting and affect the player characters. Our next campaign event is a new organization. The foundation of a new order, kingdom, or religion, society, cabal, or cult can shake the world with its actions, doctrine, dogma, and policies. On a local scale, a new organization contends with existing power groups, influencing, subverting, dominating, or allying with them to create a stronger base of power. Large and powerful organizations can exert enough influence to rule the world. Some new organizations benefit the populace, while others grow to threaten the civilization they once protected. Perhaps an important new organization arises in one part of your world. It could have humble or auspicious beginnings, but one thing is certain: it is destined to change the world as long as it progresses along its present course. Sometimes an organization's alignment is apparent from inception, but its morality can remain ambiguous until its doctrines, policies, and traditions are revealed over time. That's if you're going to bother giving your organization's alignment. I don't know. That could be helpful to you. I don't know. I've talked about on the show before how overly simplistic I find alignment. So I personally wouldn't find it terribly useful to think about what alignment would this organization be. Like, for instance, my guild of adventurers doesn't have an alignment. I mean, I guess in general, it's good. They serve the cause of good, in civilization. They're trying to protect people and further knowledge and things like that. But I mean, the guild itself doesn't have, it's not lawful good or neutral good or chaotic good or whatever. It's an organization made up of a multitude of members, all of whom have varying alignments and morals and whatnot. So, to try to say the guild has an organization, I feel like is more limiting and constraining than it is inspiring or helpful. But that's just me. That's just my opinion. All right. Where were we? Choose a type of organization. Okay. So again, we have a table with some sample types of organizations. We've got a crime syndicate or bandit confederacy, a guild, perhaps masons, apothecaries, goldsmiths, etc., magical circle or society, military or knightly order, new family dynasty or tribe or clan, a philosophy or discipline dedicated to a principle or ideal, A realm, it could be a village, town, duchy, kingdom, etc. A religion or sect or denomination, a school or university, or a secret society or a cult or cabal. So those are all different types of organizations you could come up with. So once you've decided what type of organization you have, you can think about the following questions to help you flesh it out and help you think about what impacts this new organization is going to have on your setting and your story. The new order supplants a current power group in the world, gaining territory, converts, or defectors, and reducing the previous power group's numbers. Who or what does the foundation of this new order supplant? So again, that's not going to be, not every group is going to replace a group that came before, but this might apply to your group. And if so, then this can help you think of some things. So for instance, in my world of Primordia, the Guild of Adventurers did not supplant or replace a previous group. So this is kind of not relevant for them. The new order appeals to a specific audience. Decide whether this order attracts a certain race, social class, or character class. The leader of this new order is known for a particular quality valued by his or her followers. Elaborate on why they respect him or her for this quality and what actions this leader has taken to retain the follower support. So this is something I think I will use with my Guild of Adventurers. There are numerous leaders in the guild, higher ups. It was created by a group of people or beings that came together. However, there probably is one of them that's kind of the face of the highest circle of the guild. That's the one that the members of the guild know about and relate to the most. And coming up with more about this person and why people respect her and admire her, I think would be a really cool thing to do. And I've already done a little bit with her. That's why I'm saying her, because I know she's a her. But I hadn't thought specifically about, what did she have as personal qualities that are admirable that people admire about her. So that'd be a cool thing to think about. A rival group opposes the foundation of this new organization. Choose an existing power group from your campaign to oppose the new organization, or create one from the categories on the table. So you could create two organizations. One is the new one that's rising to power, and the other one is one that's already existing that is opposing them. Decide why they oppose the new group, who leads them, and what they plan to do to stop their rival. All right, so next under our types of events, we've got discovery, expansion, or invention. Discoveries of new lands expand the map and change the boundaries of empires. Discoveries of new magic or technology expand the boundaries of what was once thought possible. New resources or archaeological finds create opportunity and wealth and set prospectors and power groups in motion to vie for their control. A new discovery or rediscovery can impact your campaign world in a meaningful way, shaping the course of history and the events of the age. Think of this discovery as a big adventure hook or series of hooks. This is also an opportunity to create a unique monster, item, god, plane, or race for your world. As long as the discovery matters, it doesn't have to be wholly original, just flavored for your campaign. So we were talking before about cliches, when you're coming up with stuff for your campaign, for your setting, it doesn't have to be completely original new idea. Feel free to steal ideas from favorite stories, wherever they come from. All you've got to do sometimes is just put a little spin on it to make it fit your setting, to make it fit your campaign, and make it your own and something unique and new, even if it's based on an idea that we've seen many times before. A discovery is particularly impressive when the adventurers in your campaign are the ones who make it. There you go. If they discover a new mineral with magical properties, map a new land that's eminently suitable for colonization, or uncover an ancient weapon with the power to wreak devastation on your world, they are likely to set major events in motion. This gives the players the opportunity to see exactly how much influence their actions have on your world. So yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you're going to have something new discovered, have the players do it. Decide on the type of discovery. Okay, so now we have types of discoveries. We've got ancient ruin or lost city of a legendary race, animal or monster or magical mutation, invention or technology or magic. It could be helpful or destructive, or both. New or forgotten god or planar entity, new or rediscovered artifact or religious relic. Yeah, and that's a point here. They keep saying, new or forgotten or new or rediscovered. In a lot of fantasy worlds, the world is old. Like, this is definitely true in Primordia. So, it can kind of blur the line between, is something really new or is it something ancient come back again, something forgotten that's been rediscovered. And a lot of times the people in the setting aren't going to know the difference, right? Maybe only as a GM, the difference between things that are truly new and things that have just been forgotten and have come again. Let's see. New or rediscovered artifact or religious relic. New land. That could be an island, a continent, lost world, a demiplane. Otherworldly object like a planar portal or alien spacecraft. A people, a race, tribe, lost civilization, or colony. A plant, a miracle herb, a fungal parasite, or a sentient plant. Resource or wealth, gold, gems, mithril, etc. So once you've determined what the discovery is, flesh it out by deciding exactly what it is. Okay, so once you've determined the type, the general type, decide exactly what it is, who discovered it, and what potential effect it could have on the world. Ideally, previous adventures in your campaign will help you fill in the blanks. But you can also think about the following questions. This discovery benefits a particular person, group, or faction more than others. Who benefits the most from the discovery? Name 3 benefits they stand to gain from this discovery. The discovery directly harms another person, group, or faction. Who is harmed the most? This discovery has consequences. Name 3 repercussions or side effects. Who ignores these repercussions? Name 2 or 3 individuals or factions struggling to possess or control this discovery. Who is likely to win? What do they stand to gain, and what are they willing to do to control the discovery? All right, next, we're just kind of barreling through these because there's a lot of them, and we're already running a little long today, but I'd like to get through this today. Next, we have the event could be a prediction, omen, or prophecy. Sometimes a foretelling of a world-shaking event becomes a world-shaking event. An omen that predicts the fall of empires, the doom of races, and the end of the world. There's some more cliches for you, but that's okay. Sometimes an omen points to change for the good, such as the arrival of a legendary hero or savior. But the most dramatic prophecies warn of future tragedies and predict dark ages. Unlike other world-shaking events, the outcome doesn't happen immediately. Instead, individuals or factions strive to fulfill or avert the prophecy or shape the exact way it will be fulfilled, according to how it will affect them. The prophecy's helpers or hinderers create adventure hooks in the campaign by the actions they take. A prophecy should foretell a big event on a grand scale, since it will take time to come true or to be prevented. Imagine that a world-shaking prophecy comes to light. If events continue on their present course, the prophecy will come true and the world will change dramatically as a result. Don't shy away from making this prophecy both significant and alarming, keeping in mind the following points. Create a prophecy that foretells a major change to the campaign world. You can build one from scratch using ideas from the current campaign or randomly determine a world-shaking event and flesh out the details. Write a list of 3 or more omens that will occur before the prophecy comes to pass. You can use events that have already occurred in the campaign so that the prophecy is closer to being fulfilled. The rest are events that might or might not happen, depending on the actions of the characters. Describe the person or creature that discovered the prophecy and how it was found. What did this creature gain by revealing it? What did this creature lose or sacrifice? Describe the individual or faction that supports the prophecy and works to ensure its fulfillment, and the one that will do all in its power to avert the prophecy. What is the first step each takes? Who suffers for their efforts? One part of the prophecy is wrong. Choose one of the omens you listed or one of the details you created for the world-shaking event that the omen predicts. the chosen omen is false, and if applicable, its opposite is true instead. So there you go. There are some thoughts to help get you going if you want to use a prophecy for your world-shaking event. And one cool way to do this might be to use the prophecy in the beginning of the campaign and then use the world-shaking event that the prophecy spoke of at the end of the campaign. And that'd be a nice setup, a nice, beginning, middle, end to a story. Or another cool way to do it is in the current campaign you're running, maybe towards the middle or the end, use a prophecy as an event, and then have the event that the prophecy is predicting be what kicks off the next campaign, or what happens in Act 2 of the next campaign. I think those would both be really cool ways to use a prophecy. All right, so our final type of event we're going to talk about today is myth and legend. If wars, plagues, discoveries, and the like can be called regular world-shaking events, mythic events exceed and surpass them. A mythic event might occur as the fulfillment of an ancient or long-forgotten prophecy, or it might be an act of divine intervention. Once again, your current campaign probably provides a few ideas for the shape of this event. If you need inspiration, you can roll on the world-shaking events table and use a D8 instead of a D10. Address the bullet point notes for that disaster, but magnify the result to the grandest scale you can imagine. So basically, you're picking a more mundane event from that table and then amping it up so that it becomes mythic. The rise or fall of a leader or era is the death or birth of a god, for example, or the end of an age or the world. A cataclysmic disaster is a world-drowning deluge, an ice age, or a zombie apocalypse. An assault or invasion is a world war, a world-spanning demonic incursion, the awakening of a world-threatening monster, or the final clash between good and evil. So I kind of did this in my events of the Breaking of the World and the Time of the Rifts, because they led to a lot of these kind of more mundane events happening, these cataclysms and things. But the source of all that was more magical or mythical or fantastic in nature. Let's see. I did that one. A rebellion dethrones a god or gods, or raises a new force such as a demon lord to divinity. A new organization is a world-spanning empire or a pantheon of new gods. A discovery is a doomsday device or a portal to eldritch dimensions where world-shattering cosmic horrors dwell. All right, so that is the last of our types of events. So again, these events can be a great way to begin a campaign. They can be a great way to end a campaign, and they can be a great way to kind of get things going again if you feel like you're more in the middle of a campaign and you feel like things are stagnating or getting boring, or you just want to shake things up. Another way to think about it is you could use one of these events when you've ended an arc. So I often recommend that people not plan too far ahead when planning a campaign, because you don't know, for one, if you're even going to play that long. And for two, you don't know what the players are going to do. So the farther ahead you plan, the more dicey it is if those plans will even come to fruition, because there's a lot of player action between now and then that could change things or take things in a new direction. So I usually recommend that you plan for more the immediate future. And as I said in a previous episode, as you go further ahead in time, make your plans more and more sketchy, more and more just kind of main ideas, and less worried about details, because those details are going to change. You'll be lucky if you can hit the main points, So, maybe you're doing that. Maybe you started a campaign and you came up with a story arc, and maybe that took you through the first 5 levels or 10 levels of play, and you finished that arc, or you're getting, the finish of that arc is approaching and you're thinking about where to go next. And using one of these events can be a great way to kick off the next leg of the campaign. And if you are, approaching like say 10th level or something like that, that's the perfect time for Act 2. So there you go. So these can be really helpful to you at all stages of a campaign. Anytime you feel like you need to give the action a kick in the seat of the pants, you can use these events and use these pages of the Dungeon Master's Guide to inspire you. So we have one final section here that I'm going to talk about today. This is a pretty short one. The next pages in here are about tracking time and calendars and things in your campaign. And we actually talked about that last time in episode 164. So the next bit I'm going to talk about today is ending a campaign. So, we talked about the best time for these events is the beginning, the middle, and the end. So you've maybe had that final event and the PCs have done what they're going to do, and you're now wanting to end the campaign. Here are some thoughts about that. A campaign's ending should tie up all the threads of its beginning and middle, unless you're going to do a sequel. Then you might want to leave some threads untied if you're planning to do a sequel campaign. But in general, you want to tie all those threads up. But you don't have to take a campaign all the way to 20th level for it to be satisfying. Wrap up the campaign whenever your story reaches its natural conclusion. So that's a great point. You might plan the campaign from the very beginning to only go to a certain point. You're like, this campaign's going to go from level 1 to 5, or from level 1 to 10, or from level 5 to 10, or whatever. So you might plan ahead to end at a point other than 20th level, which you can totally do. Or you may just kind of be playing it by ear, and you get to a point where, you've resolved an arc and maybe you're ready to do something different now, or play a different game, or for whatever reason, you decide this is a good time to end this campaign. So, you don't have to play till 20th level. You can end the campaign whenever you want, whenever it's a good point to end. And that can be something that you plan ahead of time, or it can be something you just do when you feel the time is right. Make sure you allow space and time near the end of your campaign for the characters to finish up any personal goals. Their own stories need to end in a satisfying way, just as the campaign story does. Ideally, some of the characters' individual goals will be fulfilled by the ultimate goal of the final adventure. So yeah, in an ideal world, the main thrust or the main story of your campaign pulls in the individual goals of the players, or at least some of them. So by fulfilling the main story, they're also achieving some of their own personal goals. So in an ideal world, that all, fits together real nice, but that isn't always going to happen. So, if your player characters have goals that aren't going to be resolved by resolving the main story, then you want to think about how you're going to address those and resolve those by the end of the last session. Let's see. Give characters with unfinished goals a chance to finish them before the very end, which I just said. Once the campaign is ended, a new one can begin. If you intend to run a new campaign for the same group of players, using their previous characters' actions as the basis of legends gives them immediate investment in the setting. And I'd say that's one of the benefits of using an actual setting, whether it's your setting or a setting you've borrowed from someone else, of using an actual setting that you maintain every campaign. And every campaign you're advanced, each campaign takes place after the one before, so that the players can see the impacts of previous characters that they played on the world. Let the new characters experience how the world has changed because of their old characters. In the end, though, the new campaign is a new story with new protagonists. They shouldn't have to share the spotlight with the heroes of days gone by. So there you go. It's actually a really short section on ending a campaign. I'm sure there's a lot more to be said about ending a campaign. And maybe that's something we'll talk about on a later date. That's something I think I could benefit from a discussion on, because I've a disappointingly small percentage of campaigns I've run have actually had an ending that was deliberate and wasn't just, the campaign fizzling out because I can't do it anymore, or enough players can't do it anymore, that it's not worth it, or we all get bored with it and decide to do something else or whatever. A distressingly few number of my campaigns have actually been resolved in a nice ending with a little red bow on it. So I myself could benefit from a discussion on how do you end a campaign, and maybe even a better discussion, or an important part of the discussion would be, what do you do if you just decide you want to end a campaign like right now? Like, it's not necessarily a great place to end the campaign. It's not the end you were planning for, but for whatever reason, you decide I need to end this campaign now. How do you do that? That could be an interesting topic. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. GameMastersJourney@gmail.com or @LexStarWalker on Twitter. All right. So that's going to wrap it up for this discussion. We are still in chapter 1, A World of Your Own of the DMG. So next time we crack open the DMG, we are going to be talking about play style. And the next section after that is the tiers of play. So I imagine I will at least try to do those both in one episode. And finally, we have flavors of fantasy. So that will probably have to be a separate episode from playstyle and tiers of play. And then once we go through flavors of fantasy, we'll have finally finished chapter 1, A World of Your Own. And then we will move on to chapter 2, which is all about creating a multiverse. And I think I'm going to have a lot of interesting things to say about that when we get there. But, we've got at least one episode, probably 2 episodes left discussing chapter 1 before we get into chapter 2. So, between what we talked about today and what we talked about on episode 164, we've covered a lot of information about, creating a campaign. And I hope that this is helpful to you. And I hope that, especially if you're a newer GM and maybe you're creating your first campaign, or you just haven't created very many, that we've given you some tools here to help you, figure out exactly what you want to do and come up with, like today we talked about events, come up with some interesting events that are going to happen in your campaign that are going to get the players excited about seeing, where this whole thing goes. So we will continue in the DMG at a later date, and let me know what you think of these episodes. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for episode 165 of Game Master's Journey. I hope that you enjoyed our discussion on campaign events today. And I really hope that these discussions are helpful to you, especially for you newer GMs out there, or GMs who maybe you're an experienced GM, but you've run a lot of canned stuff, and maybe you're getting ready to create a campaign of your own creation for the first time. I really hope that this is helpful. And I hope that the DMG series overall is helpful. So I love to get feedback from you, and I'd really like to hear from you. If you're finding these episodes helpful, let me know. Let me know how it's helped you. I'd really appreciate it. If you would like to get a hold of me, you can visit the website, starwalkerstudios.com, and head to starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey. And you can find all the information about the show there, and you can find all the ways that you can contact me. You can email me. You can find me on Twitter, Google+, Facebook. I'm on Pinterest and YouTube. And you can find all that information, all those links over at starwalkerstudios.com. You can also find the Game Master's Journey voicemail number. And you can call that number and you can leave me a message. And you can ask me a question or give me feedback. And if what you have to say is entertaining or enlightening, or even better, both, you might even hear your message on the show. I love to pull voicemails into the show if I can. It's always nice to have someone on here other than me. So if you have any questions, any feedback, or suggestions for future topics, anything like that, let me know. I would love to hear from you. There are a lot of great ways you can get a hold of me, and I would love to hear from you. You can also, on the website, find a link to the Game Master's Journey community over on Google+, where you can share ideas and network with other listener GMs. Finally, you can learn about how you can support the show. There are a lot of great ways you can support the show. You can become a patron. You can make a one-time donation over there on the website. You can use my Amazon referral link when you shop on Amazon. You can purchase my D&D adventure, The Trickster's Labyrinth. You can head on over to our store on Spreadshirt and buy a t-shirt or a coffee mug or something. And last but not least, can leave an iTunes review, or even better, tell a friend about the show. Tell a friend that you game with, or another person you know that plays RPGs, and even more ideally is a GM or wants to be a GM. Tell them about the show. Let them know about Game Master's Journey, and yeah, that's a great way to support the show that won't cost you any money, because I know, money can be scarce. Believe me, I know. So all this stuff, all my contact information, all the ways you can support the show, you can find all of that at starwalkerstudios.com. So this has been our July bonus episode. We will be back to our regular schedule next week. We'll have episode 166 coming out next week. And yeah, just keeping them coming every week. And I'm really enjoying doing the show. I got to say, I think sometimes I don't talk enough about kind of behind the curtain stuff when it comes to the show. I was having a bit of a rough patch, I will say. Somewhere in season 9, started getting a little rough. Just, I don't know, finding things to talk about, and more importantly, finding things that I was excited to talk about. Because it's one thing to just talk about something on the show, but I want to talk about something I'm excited to talk about, because I think that makes it more interesting to listen to than if I'm like, okay, so today we're going to talk about being a DM, right? So I kind of hit this rut where I was just having a hard time coming up with ideas for the show, having a hard time getting excited about the show. And luckily, I've made some changes behind the scenes here as far as how I produce the show. That's kind of gotten me excited about it again. We've started doing the monthly live streams, which that's really great to get to interact with you more, and more direct interaction, and doing the bonus episodes now. So these things have all kind of like gotten me amped up again about doing the show, which makes me really happy, and probably makes you happy, because it means I'm not going to be, shutting off the lights on Game Master's Journey anytime soon. Hopefully, as long as nothing unforeseen happens. Anyways, I mean, you never know what the future is going to bring. But yeah, and something else, real quick here at the end of the show, before I sign off, something else I've been thinking about is I really want to have more chance for a community to really build around the show. I mean, we've got the group on Google+, and that's great, but not everybody's on Google+, and also not everybody's always comfortable or capable or has the time to do a lot of writing. Google+ is a text kind of thing. You're writing on there. And, one of the things I was kind of wanting to do is do live streams of the actual production of the show, of when I record. Unfortunately, there's been some technical difficulties with that I haven't been able to overcome. I'm still working on it when I have time. But one of the reasons I wanted to do that is because then we could have our chat room over on YouTube, that people could interact during the show while I was recording, and could interact with me, and more importantly, I think, interact with one another. So one thing I've been kicking around one idea I've been kicking around is maybe setting up a Discord server for Game Master's Journey, for Star Walker Studios. I know some podcasts that I listen to do this, and they've been really successful with it. If you're not familiar with Discord, Discord is a voice application. It's a way that you can talk to people over the internet. Similar to, it's used for gaming. It's developed for gaming. So similar to services like Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or Mumble, ways that you can, if you're gaming with people online, that you can talk verbally to one another, whether you're raiding in World of Warcraft or Rift or something like that, or you're playing something like Diablo or Destiny or something like that, where you're playing with other people online. Discord allows you to talk to each other, and you can set up a server on Discord, and it's like, for those of you that are a little long in the tooth like me that remember chat rooms from the 90s, you can basically have chat rooms, only instead of text. Well, there is text. You can have text chat rooms too, but there's also voice chat. So I've been kicking around the idea of setting up something like this for Star Walker Studios, for Game Master's Journey, where you could go to my Discord server and you could go into a text chat room and chat with people in real time using text chat, or you could go into a voice chat room and chat with people in real time using voice chat. So, if or when I ever figure out how to stream recording the show, that's someplace everybody could go to kind of hang out while I'm recording the show. I could also use Discord to pull people onto the show if I wanted. This is something I've seen other podcasts do, where I have kind of like a waiting room. If you would like to be on the show, you can hang out in there. And if I have time, I can bring you on for a couple minutes and you can actually talk to me on the air, as it were, and be a part of the show. So we could do that, which would be super cool. I've just started using Discord myself. I've started using it when I do interviews for the show, and I've been really pleased with it so far. I'm still learning all the ins and outs of setting up and managing a server. But, if this is something that sounds interesting to you, if you would enjoy a place where you could go and hang out with other listener GMs when I'm recording or anytime, because the server would be something, it would be up all the time. So you could go there anytime, see if anybody's there, hang out, shoot the breeze. You can use voice or text, and they're different rooms. So if you don't want to do the voice thing, you could go into a text room and not have to worry about the voice. Or you can go in the voice room and just listen to what people are talking about. So if that sounds interesting to you, if that's something that you would like to see, let me know. Tweet me at LexStarWalker, shoot me an email, GameMastersJourney@gmail.com. Or if you're in the Google community, just let me know in there that you'd be interested in that. If there are enough people that want to do it, then I'll figure out how to do it. But it's going to take some time for me to figure out. And I don't want to set this up and then no one uses it, because that would be lame. And that would be lame for the few people that do try to use it and they go there and there's no one there. So, if there's just a few people that are like, yeah, I think that'd be cool, then I probably won't do it. But if I hear from a lot of you that like that idea, then it's something I'll make happen. And it's a way that we can all interact whenever it's convenient to do so, and kind of build this community to more of a back and forth between me and you. And I think even more importantly, among all of you listening to the sound of my voice right now, so that you all can connect and trade advice, ask questions, things like that, like what we do in the community on Google+, but in a format where you can actually talk using your voice and you don't have to type if you don't want to. So if that's something you'd like to see, if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know. And again, if you're unfamiliar with Discord, there's an app you can download it. You can use it on Mac or Windows, and you can use that, or you can use it through the web browser. So you don't even have to install the program if you don't want to. You can just use it through the web browser. Although it does seem that the app is a little more, has more features and more you can do with it. So if you're going to be a serious Discord user, I would definitely get the app, but you don't have to. So let me know if you would be interested in that. I would be happy to do that. So I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.